What's up, you old Italian prick? Here's the deal.
Hi, thank you for stopping by here. I wish you good health and happiness every day. This time I will discuss a film called tells the story of a Marine veteran who has to deal with gangsters and is hated by his own family. Before we get into the storyline, please subscribe to this channel so we can meet in the next video. At the beginning of the film we will be introduced to a former war Marine named Kowalt. That day was the saddest day for him because Kowalt had just been left by his wife gone forever. It is known that Kowalt has 2 children who now live in the city, and none of his 2 children wants to live with Kowalt. This is because they don't want to bother caring for an elderly Kowalt. Kowalt also has 4 grandchildren and their parents have influenced them not to like Kowalt. After that we were shown the Kowalt house, which was attended by many guests as a family gathering. The guests consisted of Kowalt's children and grandchildren as well as the children of his closest neighbors. Meanwhile downstairs, Kowalt's naughty grandchildren mess up Kowalt's collectibles. Kowalt is aware that no one in his family likes him, he even goes for a walk with his dog. Here Kowalt sees his neighbor, who is an immigrant from Asia, also happens to be celebrating a family party. When Kowalt entered the garage of his house, it turned out that there was one of Kowalt's grandchildren who was looking at the Kowalt car. The grandson said that he just found out that Kowalt had an antique car, which, if sold, would be very expensive. Then the grandson asked whether Kowalt would still be alive this year, because if not, then next year the grandson would want the antique car. Hearing this, Kowalt was very hurt, because indirectly his own grandson wanted Kowalt to die soon. When Kowalt returned to the living room, he was suddenly approached by one of the priests. The priest said that Kowalt's late wife had left a message for him to invite Kowalt to confess sins at church. Kowalt's wife knows that Kowalt has always been restless because of his past sins. Hearing this, Kowalt said that now he doesn't want to confess. In the afternoon, everyone started leaving the Kowalt house, including their children and grandchildren. The next day shows a teenager who just graduated from high school named Thou. It is known that this Thou is Kowalt's neighbor. At that time Thou was approached by a group of American gangsters who immediately bullied Thou. Thou chose to remain silent, because he did not want to get into trouble with the gangsters. Not long after, Asian teenage gangsters came who immediately challenged American teenage gangsters, because Asian gangsters who had guns finally chose to leave. This Asian gangster leader is led by someone named Spider. After that they invite Thou to join them, but Thou refuses and chooses to leave there. The next day Spider and his men came to Thou's house. Coincidentally at that time there was Thou's older sister named Rena. Rena tries to tell them to leave, because Thou won't want to join the gangsters, but because they keep insisting, finally Thou asks what they really want. They also took Thou to walk to his neighbor's house, Kowalt. It turned out that they invited Thou to take part in stealing Kowalt's antique car. On the other hand, Kowalt is at a bar with his old friend who was in the military. Not long after, Kowalt was approached by the priest who wanted to chat alone with Kowalt. Here the priest said that he had promised the Kowalt's late wife to bring Kowalt to do the forgiveness of sins. Then Kowalt told the priest that Kowalt was a war Marine. At that time Kowalt was assigned to massacre civilians who were considered rebels. Because at that time Kowalt was still young, he did not think twice about carrying out orders, so that after that massacre, Kowalt's heart has always been restless to this day. Kowalt actually wants to go to confession, but he still feels ashamed of his past mistakes. That night when Kowalt fell asleep he suddenly woke up and saw his car garage being entered by thieves. At that time, Kowalt took a weapon and entered his garage. It turned out that the person was Thou, who was ordered by Spider to steal Kowalt's car. Luckily, at that time, Thou managed to escape by knocking Kowalt down. Kowalt didn't even realize that the person who had infiltrated his garage was Thou, who was his own neighbor. The next night the spider group came back to Thou, who was with Rena at that time. This time they forced Thou to return to stealing Kowalt's car, but Thou refused and an argument ensued. Not long after, Kowalt came carrying a gun, trying to drive away the spiders. Kowalt was angry because they had destroyed Kowalt's flower pot in front of his yard. The next day Kowalt was confused because the Thou family suddenly gave various kinds of food that were placed in front of Kowalt's house. Here Rena explains that that's their custom as a form of gratitude to Kowalt for saving them. A few days later, Rena was seen walking with her crush, then they were harassed by 3 black youths who had malicious intent on Rena. Rena's crush, who happens to be a coward, keeps quiet when Rena is being bullied by them. Luckily, Kowalt saw Rena and immediately approached her. Kowalt warned them to leave immediately and let Rena go. However, because they thought that Kowalt was just an old man, they even challenged Kowalt. Kowalt put his hand inside his jacket and then raised his finger. That of course made the 3 young men confused and immediately insulted Kowalt, but this is what Kowalt did.
Damn, man. He put his finger at me.
Fucking don't listen to shit anyway. What up?
Seeing this they were immediately frightened and finally wanted to let Rena go. Rena was escorted by Kowalt home using his car. Here Rena said that she was very grateful to Kowalt for saving her. The next day Kowalt had the arrival of his eldest son and daughter-in-law. They suddenly gave gifts to Kowalt, with the reason that today is Kowalt's birthday. Even though they had never cared about Kowalt's life before, it turned out that their intention was to come to Kowalt because they had a specific purpose. Their children and in-laws persuaded Kowalt to just stay at the nursing home, while they were going to sell this house on the grounds that they needed money. Hearing this, Kowalt was annoyed, then kicked them out. In the afternoon, Rena came to Kowalt, who was having coffee in front of the house. Rena invited Kowalt to come to a family party that was being held at Rena's house. Kowalt, who happened to have not eaten since yesterday, he accepted the invitation well, and he was also amazed by Rena's family who seemed to love each other. Kowalt is also very happy when they are there caring for Kowalt like his own family. Kowalt is very jealous because after he is old none of his children and grandchildren pay attention to Kowalt. After that Rena took Kowalt to the basement, where it was filled with youths who also joined the party. It was seen that Thou continued to be alone while looking at a woman he liked. Realizing this, Kowalt approached Tai saying that Tai should not be a coward. The next day, when Kowalt had just returned from a friend's house, Rena and her mother were already waiting in the yard for Kowalt. It turned out that their purpose in coming to see Kowalt was to apologize to Kowalt because previously Thou had intended to steal his car. Here Thou's mother said that she couldn't sleep before Thou got punished for the mistake. For that Thou's mother told Thou to work to help Kowalt for 1 full week. Days passed, but Kowalt was confused about what he should order Thou. In the end Kowalt told Thou to clean every house in the complex. On the last day when Thou worked, Kowalt was seen coughing until he bled. Then Thou came to tell Kowalt that his sentence was now over and Thou was very sorry for his past mistakes. Then Kowalt went to the doctor to have his body examined. After being examined, it turned out that Kowalt had a very serious illness. The doctor even said that Kowalt's life would not be long. When he got home, Kowalt contacted his children while apologizing. Koval also said that his life would not be long, but his children didn't even seem to care about Kowalt's condition. The following days, Kowalt, who was ignored by his children, is now quite entertained by the presence of Thou, who often visits his house. One day Kowalt asked Thou what was his life goal so far. Thou said that he really wanted to be a successful person and make his family happy. Hearing this, Kowalt offered Thou a job, because Kowalt happened to have an acquaintance who was a foreman. After Thou agreed, Koval took him to one of his friends who was a barber, so he knew he wouldn't be stiff when dealing with people he just met. Here Thou is taught about how to speak politely and kindly. Thou was told to come back in and show how he greets people.
What's up, you old Italian prick?
Get out of my shop before I blow your head off and go!
Jesus Christ. Take it easy. Take it easy. What the hell?
It turned out that Thou couldn't tell the difference between greeting new people and people he had known for a long time. After being taught various things, Thou was finally taken by Kowalt to meet the foreman, who was also a good friend of Kowalt's. Here it looks Thou finally able to convince the foreman that he is able to work. Then the foreman told Thou to come back tomorrow and go straight to work. Long story short, 1 month later when Thou came home from work, suddenly he was confronted by a group of spiders, those who hate Thou. Upon the incident at that time, they immediately bullied and destroyed all of Thou's belongings. They also without hesitation burned Thou's face with cigarette butts. When he was about to get home, Thou met Kowalt, and Kowalt, who was a former soldier, realized that Thou had just been bullied. At first Thou didn't want to admit it, but in the end he said that what was bothering him was the spider group. The next day Kowalt came to one of the houses belonging to Spider's men. Without hesitation Kowalt beat him up, saying that they would never dare to disturb Thou again.
Here's the deal. Away from Tao, understand?
The scene switches to Kowalt, who is currently with Rena and her friends. Incidentally, there is also a girl that Thou has always liked. It even seems that Thou is going to date this girl. Knowing this, Kowalt said that Thou could borrow his antique car to take a walk with the girl. The next night when Kowalt is watching television, suddenly the spiders strafe Kowalt's house with guns. After that, Kowalt immediately checked on Thou's house. Fortunately there were no casualties, and the bullet just grazed Thou's neck. When Kowalt was trying to calm the situation, then Rena came in a battered state. Rena said that they had raped and abused her. Kowalt is back home, and here he is raging and blaming himself. If he didn't come and attack Spider's men, maybe this would not have happened. Not long after, Kowalt was again approached by the priest. The priest asked what Kowalt would do, because the priest understood that Kowalt was a brutal person in the past. Kowalt replied that he didn't know what to do, but what was clear was that the spider group was unforgivable. The next day, Thou came to Kowalt's house saying that he really wanted revenge for the behavior of the spider group towards Rena. Kowalt said that we should calm down and Kowalt will figure out a way. Kowalt told Thou to go home and come back at 4 p.m. After that Kowalt tried to do things that he thought could calm his heart, such as mowing the grass and soaking in hot water. Not only that, Kowalt also shaved his head at one of his friend's place, then bought clothes with the best suits. Then Kowalt also came to the priest to do a confession like the will of his late wife first. In the afternoon, Thou returned to Kowalt's house asking what Kowalt's next plan was. Kowalt said that today the spider group would receive a reward. Then Kowalt took Thou to the dungeons. Here Kowalt flashed his Marine badge to Thou. Thou asked how many people Kowalt had killed when he was in the army. Kowalt answered maybe dozens of people. When Thou was off guard, Kowalt came out and locked the door. Kowalt says that Thou is better here and that he will sort things out himself. Before leaving, Kowalt left his dog with Thou's grandmother. Then Kowalt contacted Rena and told him that Rena had to come to his house tonight to free Thou, who was now locked in the basement. On the other hand, it turned out that the priest had invited 2 police to stand guard at the spider group's residence, because he was sure that Kowalt would surely slaughter them. But because they had been waiting there for a very long time, the 2 policemen took the priest away on the pretext of a false report. At night, Kowalt appeared in front of the spider group's residence. Here, Kowalt tried to intimidate them by saying that he had come to kill them all.
Shrimp dick, midget like you.
Those around wanted to see what Kowalt would actually do. When Kowalt took the weapon in his suit, Spider's group then showered bullets on Kowalt until Kowalt died. However, it turns out that the Koval does not carry any weapons, because all he will take in his coat is a match. Kowalt did that because he remembered that his life would not be long anymore, and so that the spider group would get severe punishment from the police. Kowalt could have slaughtered them, but doing so would only add to his sins. After that the spider group was immediately arrested because it happened that there were also many witnesses who saw it. Thou, who also came to the scene of the incident, really didn't expect that Kowalt was willing to sacrifice himself to save the Thou family. A few days later, Kowalt's children and grandchildren were summoned by attorneys to hear probate regarding all of Kowalt's estate. They were very enthusiastic because soon they would get an inheritance, but it turned out that Kowalt left all his wealth to the church as an effort to atone for all his sins. And his expensive antique car, Kowalt bequeathed it to Thou, and then the movie is over. One of the stories we might take from this film is to love your parents while they are still alive, because after they die there are lots of regrets that will continue to come to us. If you like this video, please like and also subscribe so we can meet again in the next videos. And bye.